I never thought moving off campus would feel like a mistake. Sophomore year had just started, and freedom smelled like secondhand IKEA furniture, instant ramen, and freedom from the RA who once wrote us up for whispering after midnight. Our new place was a boxy, beige rental on a sleepy street about a mile from campus. Not much to look at, but it was ours. It was me, Harper, and two girls I had bonded with during our freshman year, Mallory and Jess. We weren't best friends exactly, but we had made it through communal bathrooms, dining hall food, and late-night cram sessions together, and that felt like enough. At first, things were great. We were finally out of the dorms. We had a little backyard with a broken lawn chair and a rusted grill we swore we'd use someday. We'd leave the front door open on warm afternoons and blast music while doing laundry or dancing in the kitchen in our socks. But it didn't take long for things to shift. Mallory, she was always the wild one. Loud, funny, the kind of person who walks into a room and makes it hers. At first, it was weed and cheap vodka. Then it was acid tabs and Adderall capsules traded like candy. She made friends fast, especially with a group of guys from off-campus housing who had connections to harder stuff. Jess and I weren't angels, but after a couple of rough hangovers and a terrifying night where Mallory didn't come home until sunrise and couldn't remember where she'd been, we decided to pull back. Mallory didn't. She changed fast, got paranoid, moody, aggressive. She'd snap at us over stupid things like dishes in the sink or whose turn it was to buy toilet paper. Her eyes always looked glassy, like she was seeing something behind you instead of at you. But it wasn't until midwinter that everything really spiraled. It was a Saturday night in February, I think. Snow hadn't stuck yet, but the wind felt like it was slicing your face. We had all planned to go to a party together. Some themed thing a friend of a friend was throwing near downtown. I left early. I had an early shift at the campus bookstore the next morning, and I wasn't in the mood for cheap beer and loud EDM. Jess said she'd walk home with Mallory later, that they'd stick to the buddy system. That was our one rule. No one walked alone. But Mallory didn't come home with Jess. I came back around midnight and crashed hard. I didn't hear anything that night, but when I woke up, Jess was already in the kitchen, red-eyed and silent. She told me that Mallory had ditched her at the party, just disappeared with some guy. Jess had walked home alone, scared and furious. She'd texted Mallory, calling her out. Nothing mean, just honest. Hurt, mostly. Mallory's response was unhinged. She went off. Called Jess a controlling little bitch, told her to grow up, accused her of being jealous. I saw the texts, screens full of insults and threats. At first we laughed it off. It was so over the top it almost didn't feel real. But it kept going. The next morning Jess went to her on-campus job at the wellness center. Mallory showed up an hour later and screamed at her across the lobby. 60 people saw it. She had to be escorted out by campus security. Her mom, who had come into town randomly and was staying with her, stood in the corner the whole time, not saying a word. I was in class when it happened. When I came back, Jess was shaking in her room. Mallory had come back to the house and was pacing like a caged animal. Her mother sat on the couch, stiff as a statue. I tried to make myself a grilled cheese, pretending everything was fine. But the second I turned my back, Mallory cornered me. She's dead to me, she spat, eyes wild, after everything I've done for her. I didn't say anything, just nodded and backed away. My heart was pounding in a way I hadn't felt before, like my body knew something my brain couldn't articulate. I went to my room, closed the door, and sat on the floor with my back against it. That's when I heard Jess come home. She was crying on the phone with her mom, telling her what had happened at work. Then the yelling started. "Don't come in here acting like you're some victim," Mallory shouted. "You abandoned me. I could have been hurt last night." Jess wasn't backing down this time. "You left me. You disappeared with a stranger and didn't even check if I got home safe." It escalated fast, faster than I could process. I opened my door just in time to see Mallory lunge toward Jess, who ran to her room. Mallory slammed the door on her hand as Jess tried to close it. Jess screamed. Her mother stood frozen in the hallway, whispering, "Danielle, please." like she was trying to tame a wild dog. I grabbed Jess and pulled her toward the front door. We made it to the porch, Jess cradling her hand and sobbing. That's when we heard her mother scream from inside, "Put that down!" We froze. Then the door burst open. Mallory stood there, barefoot, eyes blazing. In her hand was a kitchen knife. Not a little paring one of those big chef's knives we barely used. "I'm gonna fucking kill you," she screamed at Jess, lifting the knife above her head. I don't remember deciding to move, I just remember grabbing her wrist and forcing the knife down. We wrestled. The knife clattered onto the dead grass. I kicked it away and screamed for Jess to run. Mallory didn't stop. She turned and ran back inside. I followed just long enough to see her grab another knife, smaller, sharper, and press it to her own throat. "Want to watch me bleed?" she said, eyes locked on mine. "You want that?" "Huh?" her mother screamed. I froze. Something about her eyes told me this wasn't an act. I started to feel the edges of the world blur. Next thing I knew, I was outside again, running down the street with Jess's hand in mine. We banged on the neighbor's door. They let us in without question. The woman wrapped Jess's hand in a dish towel while her husband called 911. We could still hear Mallory's screams from inside our house. Guttural, inhuman sounds that echoed through the whole street. The police came. They brought a crisis team. Mallory was taken to the hospital. We gave statements. We didn't go back for 2 weeks. When we finally returned, it was only to pack. The place felt haunted. Not by ghosts, but by the memory of something breaking, something human unraveling right in front of us. I later learned Mallory had experienced a full psychotic break. Stress, drug use, and a pre-existing condition no one knew about had fused into something volatile. Her mother had tried to intervene but was too afraid. Jess and I moved to a new apartment and tried to finish the semester without falling apart. I still think about her sometimes, about the person she was when we met, laughing in the dorms, dancing barefoot on our crappy kitchen tiles. And I think about that moment on the porch when I knew she was going to kill someone, when my body moved before I could think, when I stopped being scared of confrontation and became scared of what happens when we ignore the signs. I've learned a lot since then, about trauma, about mental illness, about listening to your gut. But most of all, I've learned how quickly the people you think you know can turn into strangers. Sometimes all it takes is one quiet house and one very bad night. I was 32 when everything fell apart. You don't think you'll end up back at square one in your 30s. Not after a marriage, a mortgage, and a decade of building a life. But there I was, packing a single suitcase in the bedroom of the house my wife and I once shared. By then, we were more ghosts to each other than partners. Our 4th anniversary had come and gone with little more than a nod, and not long after, the silence between us became permanent. The divorce wasn't dramatic, just draining. After the lawyers took their cut and the bank swooped in like a vulture, neither of us had much left. She moved out first, and I stayed behind a few weeks to wrap up what little remained. I thought I'd feel relief when the front door clicked shut behind me that final time, but all I felt was the cold. To top it off, my job was hanging by a thread. Layoffs were happening in waves, and I was pretty sure I was next. That uncertainty made signing a year-long lease feel reckless. I couldn't move in with friends, most had families or 2 small apartments, and I didn't want to go crawling back to my parents just yet. So I did what people do when their life is falling apart. I went on Craigslist. That's how I found the house. It was listed as a short-term furnished room, private bath, quiet house. The rent was $800, which was absurdly low for the city, especially considering it included utilities and had its own bathroom. I was skeptical, scam-level skeptical, but the photos looked legit, so I messaged the poster. A man named Alan replied within the hour, saying the room was still available and I could come by to see it that evening. Desperation overrides caution sometimes, and I agreed. The house was in the southeast part of the city, on a quiet residential street lined with tall, skinny trees. It was one of those older homes converted into shared living. Each floor had a separate tenant. Alan greeted me at the door. He was in his late 50s, tall, silver hair slicked back, with a voice like sandpaper softened by too many cigarettes. Something about him put me at ease, though. He wasn't overly friendly, just normal. The room itself was better than I expected. Ground floor, big window, queen bed, a small couch, and a desk. The bathroom was attached. It didn't feel like a slumlord's last resort. It felt temporary, but safe. I asked for first month's rent up front, Alan said. Month to month, no lease. People come and go, especially in this economy. I asked about the other tenants. Nice young couple upstairs, he said. From Germany. And a quiet guy in the basement, keeps to himself. I should have asked more. But I was tired and anxious and just wanted to stop living out of my car. I handed him a bank draft and moved in 2 days later. The German couple introduced themselves as Marta and Felix. They were sweet, maybe in their early 20s. New to the country, full of optimism and thick accents. We had dinner together that first night. Spaghetti they'd made too much of. I learned they'd been there about a month and were already planning to move out. I asked why. They looked at each other and hesitated. "It's not the house," Felix said. "It's someone downstairs." "Jim?" Marta added softly. "What about him?" I asked. Another pause. "He's strange," she said finally. "Unsettling. He watches, says weird things." Felix tried to laugh it off, but his eyes didn't match the smile. "We just want to feel comfortable, you know?" That night, I locked my door for the first time in years. The couple moved out 3 days later. Alan helped them carry boxes to an Uber and waved them off like proud parents seeing their kids off to college. That night, I noticed the music in the basement. It wasn't loud, just a low, constant hum of synths and bass lines, like some old industrial playlist looping endlessly. I met Jim the following week. It was late afternoon. I was heating up leftover pizza when he came upstairs, barefoot and silent as a shadow. He looked younger than I expected, maybe mid-20s. Lanky, pale, patchy beard, messy hair like he'd been cutting it himself in the mirror. "I'm Ian," I said, offering a casual smile. "Jim," he replied, without looking at me. His voice was raspy, monotone. He reached for a glass from the cupboard, filled it with tap water, and stood there drinking it while I stood by the microwave awkwardly. "You knew?" he asked finally. "Yeah. About a week now." He nodded but said nothing else. I tried a few more lines. What he did for work, if he'd been in the house long, but he sidestepped every question. After a tense 5 minutes, he slinked back down the stairs like he'd never been there. I didn't think much of Jim at first. I chalked him up to social awkwardness. I've known people like that, loners maybe dealing with mental health stuff or just not wired for small talk. It's not a crime to be weird. Then the police showed up. I was reading in bed when I heard a knock. 2 sharp raps then. "Police. Open the door." I froze. You never think those words are meant for you. I cracked the door and saw 2 uniformed officers standing in the hallway. They looked calm, but serious. One of them, Officer Brooks, said they were investigating a theft. "Your housemate Jim reported some items stolen, said he suspects you." I just blinked. "What? I barely know him." They asked to search the room. I agreed, nervously, but without hesitation. I had nothing to hide. Except they found something. Jim's wallet, a pair of earbuds, a flash drive, all shoved in the back of my closet, in a shoebox I hadn't even touched. "I didn't put that there," I said, hard hammering. "I swear to God." The cops didn't arrest me. They made a note, told me not to contact Jim, and left. But their faces said it all. They didn't buy it. I sat on my bed in silence for hours. My skin felt too tight. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I knew what had happened. Jim had planted those things. Why, I didn't know. But the truth was clear. He wanted me gone, or worse. The next day, I knocked on Jim's door. Music played behind it. Some distorted ambient noise. No response. I banged harder. Nothing. I considered kicking the door or yelling, but I didn't want to escalate anything. I retreated, locked myself in my room, and stayed there. That week, I lived like a fugitive in my own home. I used the bathroom with the door open so I could hear if anyone approached. I wedged a chair under my doorknob at night. I stopped cooking and lived on granola bars and gas station sandwiches. Then, one night, I woke to the soft click of a lock. Someone was trying to open my door. I froze. Heart pounding. I reached for the only weapon I had, a thick hardcover book, and crept to the door. I listened. The handle jiggled again. Then I flung the door open. Jim stood there, caught. He looked startled, like a child caught sneaking cookies. "Sorry," he muttered. "Wrong door." I stared at him, breathless. "Don't ever come near my room again." He mumbled another sorry and slinked back downstairs. I called Alan the next morning, told him everything. Police, planted evidence, attempted break-in. "I'll talk to him," Alan said, unfazed. "But it's a shared house, man. You've got a lock on your door. That's all I can offer." That was when I knew. I had to get out. I spent every lunch break searching listings, emailing landlords, asking co-workers if they knew of any short-term sublets. Anything to get out now. But Jim wasn't done. A few nights later, I came home late from a friend's place. The house was dark, quiet. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. Jim was waiting in the hallway. His eyes were wild, bloodshot, hands trembling at his sides. "You told Alan lies," he whispered. "I didn't. You think I don't see it? How you look at me, how you talk to the others?" "There are no others anymore, Jim," I said. "Everyone's gone. Because of you." He lunged. It wasn't graceful, more like a drunk staggering forward, but he grabbed the back of my neck and tried to slam me against the wall. I twisted free, shoved him backward, and sprinted to my room. Locked the door, called the police. When they came, he didn't deny it. They took him away. He was gone for a few days, probably held for observation or something. I didn't care. I packed what little I had, left a note for Alan, and walked out the door. I never looked back. A month later, I moved into a studio apartment across town. It wasn't much, bare walls, ancient plumbing, but it was mine. No roommates, no shared walls, no locked doors between me and danger. I never found out what was wrong with Jim. Whether it was drugs or mental illness or just something darker. I didn't want to know. I just wanted to forget. But some nights, when the city gets too quiet, and I hear footsteps echo down the hall outside my apartment, I still lock my bedroom door just in case. I was 20 when I first moved into Belcroft Hall, a dull, tan brick residence building at Holbrook University in northern Illinois. It was my first year living away from home, though I wasn't fresh out of high school like most of the kids on my floor. I'd taken a couple of years off after graduation to work and save money, helped install HVAC systems in suburban houses during long, hot summers and bitter Midwest winters. So by the time I applied to Holbrook, I was ready, focused, determined to keep my head down and do well. I wasn't there to party or make TikToks in the hallways. When you sign up for residence, they pair you with a random roommate. You can fill out a short compatibility form, but I got the sense that it was more of a formality than an actual screening tool. I marked that I liked quiet, was a non-smoker, and preferred someone serious about school. Pretty standard. My assigned roommate was named Shane. When I walked into room 214 for the first time, he was already unpacked and lying back on the bed farther from the door. His side of the room was chaotic. Band posters slapped on the wall with duct tape, an ashtray already full of cigarette butts by the window, and a huge stereo speaker stacked beside his bed. He sat up and gave me a nod. "You the roommate?" he asked. "Yeah, Ian," I said, offering a hand. "Shane." We shook hands. His grip was dry and loose. He looked older than I expected, probably 22 or 23, a little older than me. pale skin, greasy dark hair, piercings on both ears, and one above his lip. He wore a faded hoodie from a band I'd never heard of and black jeans with a hole in one knee. He seemed decent at first. A little aloof, maybe, but not hostile. We made awkward small talk while I unpacked my stuff. It was clear early on we weren't going to be best friends. I liked books, late-night walks, quiet video games. Shane was into punk music, dirt bikes, and drinking. He didn't have a laptop or a desk lamp. He had rolling papers, 2 energy drinks on his nightstand, and a chipped Zippo lighter with a skull etched on the side. But I didn't care. I didn't need a friend, just a roommate I could tolerate. The first week or 2 went okay. He was usually out during the day and came back late. I assumed he was exploring the campus or meeting people. Sometimes he didn't come back at all. I was relieved when he didn't. I slept better alone. But then his friends started coming around. The first time I saw them, I was walking back from the dining hall on a Friday night. I pushed open the door to our room and immediately smelled weed. Thick, sour, and unmistakable. There were 3 of them, all older, mid-30s maybe. Not students, not even trying to blend in. One of them was enormous, bald, wearing a patched-up denim vest over bare skin, jeans torn and stained. Another guy had long hair, a ratty leather jacket, and a look that made my skin crawl, like he was constantly calculating something behind his eyes. Shane saw me come in and barely looked up. "Yo, Ian, you cool if the guys chill for a bit?" I hesitated. Sure. But I wasn't cool with it, at all. They were drinking straight from brown glass bottles and half laughing at some inside joke. I sat at my desk for all of 3 minutes before grabbing my laptop and heading next door to Gavin's room, a guy from my orientation group. Later that night, I came back around 1 a.m. The room was empty, but stale smoke still clung to the curtains. I opened the window and went to bed. Things only got weirder from there. Shane's friends started showing up more often. Once or twice a week turned into almost every other night. They never stayed long, maybe a couple hours, but their presence put me on edge. I'd be lying in bed pretending to study, headphones in, while they joked about fights and cops and things I didn't want to understand. One time I overheard them talking about breaking into a vending machine, not on campus, somewhere off-site, but they laughed like it was a joke. Another time I heard the bald guy say something about parking lot security cams and how to avoid them. Shane laughed and told him to shut up, but it felt real. Not like a joke. Shane was becoming more erratic. Some nights he came in late, his eyes bloodshot, mumbling to himself. He started leaving the window open no matter the weather. Once I woke up and found him standing there at 3 a.m., just staring out into the dark. "You okay?" I asked. He didn't turn around. "Yeah, just thinking." The next morning he was gone again. At some point I stopped sleeping in our room most nights. I started crashing on Gavin's floor or studying until sunrise in the library. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't want them to worry or worse, pull me out and make me commute. One night in November, everything escalated. It was a Wednesday. I remember because I had a midterm the next morning and was in the study lounge until almost midnight. When I got back to the room, the door was slightly open. Inside, Shane and 4 of his friends were sitting in a loose circle. They had beer bottles, something that looked like a modified bong, and one guy was definitely rolling something. I froze. The big guy, the bald one, looked up at me. "You the roommate?" he asked. Yeah," he grinned. His teeth were brown. "You're the quiet type, huh?" "I guess." Shane gestured to me with a lazy hand. "Ian's chill. He won't say shit." I didn't reply. I dropped my bag on my bed, grabbed my charger, and left again. I ended up sleeping in the lounge that night with my hoodie as a pillow. At 3 a.m., I heard shouting from down the hall, loud enough to echo through the floor. Then heavy footsteps, doors slamming. Campus security showed up 10 minutes later. When I returned the next morning, Shane was gone. His friends too. The room smelled like beer and something worse, like wet ashes. I opened the window. cleaned up what I could, and went to class. But Shane didn't come back that night, or the next. By the third day, I figured he'd just gotten in trouble and was laying low, maybe suspended. But a week passed, then another. No one had seen him. I finally reported him missing to campus security. They asked me routine questions. When did I last see him? Who were his friends? Did I know where he went? I gave them what little I had, descriptions of the men, the frequency of their visits. I admitted that I didn't know their names. They promised to investigate. A few days later, actual police officers came to talk to me. They were polite but firm. One of them, Officer Riker, had a stare like a drill sergeant. "Why didn't you report his friends earlier?" he asked. "I didn't think I had to," I said. "I thought they were just his friends." "You said they weren't students." "I don't think so, no." "Did you ever see them carrying weapons?" But one time, I thought I saw something in one guy's coat, like a handle. But I didn't look close. They wrote that down. Weeks passed. Christmas break came and went. When we returned in January, Shane's bed was still empty, his side of the room untouched. Eventually, the RA came and packed up his things. I was given a new roommate, a quiet guy named Marcus. The semester crawled on. The police stopped asking questions. The older guys stopped showing up. Or if they didn't, I never saw them again. The last I heard, Shane was never found. The police had leads, but nothing solid. I tried to move on, but sometimes when I close my eyes, I see that bald man's grin. Hear Shane mumbling to himself in the dark. Feel the tension of a room that had become a second skin of dread. Years later, I saw a face I recognized on a crime documentary about a missing person case in Chicago. A man in his 30s, suspected in a string of abductions. It was the guy with the leather jacket. Same eyes, same smirk. They never mentioned Shane. I don't know what happened to him. Maybe he ran off with the wrong people. Maybe it was an overdose. Maybe worse. But I still remember what he said once, on one of the rare nights we actually talked. I'd asked him how he met those guys. "They found me," he said. "Where?" I asked. He smiled without looking at me. "Doesn't matter where. When people want you bad enough, they find you. And sometimes, they never let go." I was 21 when I moved into that old house on Maple Avenue. The place had 4 bedrooms, creaky hardwood floors, and a slanted porch that felt like it might collapse if you leaned on it too hard. Rent was cheap, $375 each, which felt like a godsend for students like us barely scraping by in a small college town in Pennsylvania. I moved in with 3 other guys: Daniel, who I'd known since my first year; Jordan, who was chill and quiet but always cooked way too much food; and Marcus, who I didn't know very well at the time, but we clicked quickly over video games and late-night runs to the gas station. It wasn't a glamorous place. The pipes moaned when you ran hot water. The walls were so thin you could hear someone sneezing 2 rooms away, and there was this weird closet tucked beside the living room that we used for junk we didn't want in our own rooms. Still, it was home. There was always music playing, some kind of buzz of conversation or laughter, and we had our rhythm. That was before Austin moved in. We met Austin through Daniel. They'd gone to high school together, and one night after a party, Austin tagged along when a group of us came back to our place for drinks. He was loud, funny, charismatic in that kind of reckless way that made you feel like everything was a joke, like nothing really mattered. He made everyone laugh that night, shotgunned beers like he was in a frat movie, and passed out snoring on our couch with a grin still on his face. I didn't think much of it at the time. A couple of weeks later, Daniel mentioned Austin was getting kicked out of his apartment. He didn't go into details, just said something vague about roommates not getting along. We didn't have a spare bedroom, but Daniel brought up the junk closet near the living room. "It's not ideal," he said, "but it's big enough for a mattress. He's desperate, man." We cleaned it out. I remember being surprised at how big it actually was once the junk was gone. No windows, just a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling and a wall outlet that sparked once when I plugged in the vacuum. "He can stay here?" I asked. Marcus shrugged. "He pays rent, who cares?" So, Austin moved in. At first it was kind of fun. He was always up for a beer or a movie. He made killer grilled cheese at 2 a.m. and had this habit of pulling people into conversations whether they wanted to talk or not. He had stories, crazy stories, that didn't always sound true, but you wanted to believe them anyway. But within a few weeks, things started to feel off. He didn't seem to go to class anymore, though he insisted he was still enrolled. He was always broke, yet somehow never ran out of weed. His room started to smell like stale smoke, sweat, something chemical. We avoided it. He kept the door shut most of the time anyway. Then the smaller things started. Jordan noticed money missing from his wallet. Just a 20 here and there, but enough to feel strange. One day I came home and found my laptop moved slightly on my desk, like someone had picked it up and put it back down wrong. Daniel's PlayStation controller disappeared, only to reappear in the living room a few days later. Marcus mentioned that one of his textbooks vanished, then came back with a different crease in the spine. We started watching each other, subtly, locking our doors more, marking cash, checking our drawers. Austin always acted like nothing was wrong. "You guys are paranoid," he laughed one night, feet up on the coffee table. "You think I'm casing the place?" No one answered, but we were all thinking it. The turning point came on a Thursday afternoon. I came home from class and checked the mail like usual. It was mostly junk, pizza coupons, grocery flyers, a credit card offer. But one envelope had my name on it, and it was already partially opened. Inside was a brand new credit card with my name printed on it. I froze. I hadn't applied for anything. When I called the company, they told me I'd applied online a week ago using my full name, birthday, and current address. I canceled the card on the spot. My stomach churned. I remembered that I'd left a folder with my passport copy and social security number in the desk drawer in my room for an internship application. My door hadn't been locked that week. I told Daniel and Marcus that night. "We need to talk to him," I said. "Maybe there's another explanation," Jordan offered weakly. But even he didn't sound convinced. When Austin came back that night, we sat him down in the living room. I didn't go in accusing. I just asked him if he'd seen the letter or if he knew anything about it. He exploded. "What the fucks are you saying, huh? That I'm stealing from you now?" His voice was sharp and loud, and his face went red almost instantly. "You think I'm some piece of shit criminal?" "I'm just asking," I said, trying to stay calm. "Someone opened my mail. Someone applied for a card in my name. I don't know shit about your mail," he said, stepping toward me. He kept walking until he was right over me, fists clenched, chest puffed. "Stand up," he said. "Say it to my face." "I'm not gonna fight you, Austin." He grabbed the collar of my hoodie and yanked me halfway off the couch. Before I could react, Marcus jumped up and shoved him off. Austin staggered, then threw a wild punch that hit Daniel in the side of the head. That was it. We all piled on, pinned him down. Eventually, he stopped struggling. We let him go. He stormed out without a word, slamming the front door so hard the frame cracked. My hands were shaking. Jordan was silent. Daniel had a bruise on his jaw. We changed the locks the next morning. He disappeared for a while after that. Days passed with no sign of him. I tried to forget. I called the police and reported the credit card fraud, but without solid proof, they couldn't do much. They gave me a number for a financial crimes unit. The house was quiet again. For a moment, I thought maybe that was the end of it. Then, one night around 3 a.m., I woke up to the front door creaking open. It wasn't loud, just that long, slow groan of old hinges, enough to freeze the blood in your veins when you know it should be locked. I held my breath. Footsteps creaked up the stairs, heavy, deliberate. My door burst open. It was Austin. He didn't say anything, just marched into the room and grabbed me by the arm, yanking me out of bed so fast I hit the floor hard. My shoulder cracked against the wood. I shouted. Marcus and Daniel came running. They tackled him again, but he fought back harder this time. We managed to pin him again long enough for me to grab my phone and call the cops. This time, we pressed charges. When they searched the small blue plastic bin in his room, the one he kept under his bed, they found used needles, a burnt spoon, lighters, a tiny scale, and little plastic baggies. Heroin, meth, pills I didn't recognize. It was all there. The cops said he was lucky we called them. Said things could have gone a lot worse. I didn't feel lucky. I felt shaken, violated. He was sentenced to a short jail term. Not enough, in my opinion, but enough to get him out of our lives. After that, we sealed that little room shut and turned it back into storage. None of us ever went in there again. By the end of the semester, Austin had dropped out. Rumor had it he moved to West Virginia to live with a cousin. I never checked to see if it was true. Sometimes I still wake up at 3 a.m. and listen, just to be sure the front door is still closed, still locked, still safe, because I'll never forget how quickly someone you barely know can become your worst nightmare, and how danger doesn't always knock. Sometimes it already has a key. Sometimes it's already inside. I didn't realize how unsafe I'd been until years later, when distance gave me clarity and my sister finally told me everything. At the time, I was just a high school kid, 15, turning 16 that spring, dealing with my own chaos at home. My mom was in a toxic relationship with a guy named Steve, who acted like my existence was a personal offense. Everything I did, from how I talked to how I chewed my food, seemed to piss him off. My older sister Natalie had moved out by then. She was 7 years ahead of me and living in a rental house with her fiancé, a guy named Josh, and a couple roommates they found online. Visiting her place was my only real escape. I'd spend entire weekends there, sleeping on a futon in Josh's office just to get away from the shouting and slamming doors at home. That house, on a quiet little street in a city I'll just call Maplebridge, felt like a different world. Clean, calm, and full of laughter when it was just Josh, Natalie, and their other friend-turned-roommate, Brian. But there were 2 other people living there too. And that's where things get complicated. Their names were Derek and Lena. I didn't think much of them at first. They kept to themselves mostly, spending their time holed up in Derek's room at the end of the hall. I thought they were just introverts or maybe socially awkward. Derek was 28 and Lena was 24. He had the kind of pale, unhealthy look that comes from living off energy drinks and LED light, and Lena never spoke. I'm not exaggerating. Not once. Not to me, not to Natalie, not even when I said hi directly to her face. She'd just blink and walk away. Still, I ignored the weirdness. I was used to walking on eggshells at home, so quiet roommates weren't a problem. And besides, I wasn't really there for them. The office I slept in was downstairs next to the half bath. That bathroom wasn't great. It didn't even have a proper shower, just an old tub with a janky curtain. But for some reason, Lena always used it, even though there was a nicer full bathroom upstairs. I chalked it up to her being quirky and didn't ask questions. That was my mistake. Natalie and Josh had found Derek online. He seemed like a quiet guy who paid rent on time and wouldn't throw parties, which was exactly what they wanted. Lena came into the picture later. She wasn't on the lease, just kind of appeared one day and never left. Everyone assumed she was harmless, just awkward. In hindsight, Natalie told me, they were too trusting. They just wanted to believe the best about people. Brian, the other roommate, had his suspicions early on. He told me later that he saw Derek watching me once from the hallway when he didn't think anyone was around. But back then, none of us connected the dots. One weekend in April, I stayed over to catch up on a big project. I was pulling a late night in the office, laptop open, headphones in, running on caffeine and stress. I remember hearing the bathroom shower turn off but didn't think much of it. 10 minutes later, I looked up from my screen, and that's when I saw her. Lena. She was completely naked, standing in the hallway just outside the office door watching me. I froze. The door was cracked, just a sliver, but I saw her eyes, locked on me, unblinking. I whispered, "Lena?" And just like that, she turned and walked away. No words, no reaction. I told myself I imagined it. I was sleep-deprived, amped up on soda and sugar. My brain was playing tricks. I didn't mention it to anyone. But something changed after that. I started keeping the office door fully closed, wedging a chair in front of it when I slept. It was an instinct more than anything, like my body knew something my brain refused to admit. About a month later, Brian brought up something odd. He was frustrated because he'd found smudged fingerprints on the outside of the office window, my window. It faced the street and the blinds didn't cover it entirely. He thought it was just some neighborhood creep or a bored teenager playing games. Josh was concerned enough to call the non-emergency police line, but there was nothing to go on. Still, it rattled everyone. Josh installed outdoor cameras the next week, motion-triggered ones, pointing at all the windows and entry points. He also added an indoor one in the shared hallway, just as a precaution. Natalie told me they'd planned to mention it to Derek and Lena, but they were out of town for a long weekend and just forgot. Summer rolled in, and I stopped staying over as often. Things with Steve had cooled down at home for a while, and I spent more time with friends. Then one day in July, I showed up at Natalie's unannounced and found Derek's room completely empty. Derek and Lena moved out, she said bluntly. I asked why. She exchanged a look with Josh and said, because they're fucking weirdos and we should have kicked them out a long time ago. That's when the story spilled out. Josh had been reviewing footage from the hallway cam one night, just bored and checking the logs. That's when he noticed it. Lena, emerging from the bathroom after her late showers, creeping up to the office door and staring through the crack. Not once, not twice, multiple times. Sometimes for 20 or 30 minutes. Just standing there, watching me sleep. It made him sick. He went back through older files. She did it almost every night I was there. But that wasn't all. The camera outside the office window showed Derek, standing in the shadows, peeking into the room. Not every night, but enough. Enough to see me changing clothes. Enough to know what times I was vulnerable. Josh and Brian confronted them. Natalie wasn't home, but when she heard about it, she was furious. Brian described the confrontation to me later. They barged into Derek's room, yelling, demanding an explanation. That's when they saw it. My clothes. Shirts I thought I'd lost. Folded neatly on Derek's bed. And drawings. Drawings of me sleeping. One pinned to the wall. Another on his desk. Poems, too. Creepy, handwritten notes with my name. They didn't show me those. I didn't want to see. And the final straw? Security footage of Lena, caught in the kitchen, spitting into my drink, deliberately, laughing silently. Derek, on another night, seen licking the apples I kept in the fridge, pouring regular milk into my lactose-free bottle. No one told me at the time why I'd been getting so sick. Josh gave them 2 hours to get out, no cops, just a threat. Leave now, or we will call the police and show them the footage. They left. I wish that were the end, but it wasn't. Months later, Natalie and I were having wine on her porch when she told me there was more. You remember how you got sick that one weekend? She said. It wasn't your stomach. It was them. We didn't tell you, but the cameras caught more. Stuff we didn't want you to see. I went still. She looked down. I'm sorry we didn't tell you earlier. We didn't want to traumatize you more than you already were. I asked what else they'd seen. They used to talk about you, she said, in the footage, when they didn't think anyone was home, whispering about your hair, your skin, how innocent you looked. I felt like vomiting. I still do writing this. I'm 20 now. I've had time to process it, to look back and see all the warning signs I missed. How Lena never spoke, but always watched. How Derek never smiled, but always listened. How the two of them built a fantasy in their heads and used me to fill it. The worst part? I never would have known if Natalie and Josh hadn't installed those cameras. It still haunts me. What might have happened if they hadn't? If I'd stayed over one more time? if the door hadn't been locked, if they'd waited until everyone else was asleep. I still check windows. I still wedge chairs under hotel doorknobs. I still feel sick when I open a drink I didn't pour myself. Sometimes people ask why I'm so jumpy, why I don't stay over at friends' houses, why I never accept food I didn't prepare. I just say, bad roommates once. That's all. But it was more than that. It was a slow, deliberate invasion of my safety, my privacy, my body, and I'll never let that happen again. I didn't move to Littlebridge with any dreams of building a life, just enough to keep one from collapsing. It was late summer in 2016 when I left my ex, my job, and most of my belongings behind in a town 2 hours north. I had just enough money for a deposit on a room. I found a listing online, nothing fancy. A quiet residential street, a newly remodeled home, rent below market rate. The ad said, looking for one roommate. Must be respectful and clean, no smoking. Room available immediately. The guy who posted it was named David. He was maybe in his mid-30s, quiet and polite when I met him. I remember he wore a faded gray polo shirt tucked into black slacks, like he'd just come from a job interview or maybe church. His blondish brown hair was clipped short and neat, and he wore these wire-frame glasses that gave him a mild, bookish appearance. I thought he looked like a high school math teacher. The house was clean, better than I expected. Not huge. 3 bedrooms, a long hallway that split the kitchen and living room from the back half of the house. The walls were freshly painted a pale blue, and the furniture all looked like it had been recently assembled from IKEA. Basement's off limits, he told me, right as I was about to finish signing the lease. He smiled when he said it, but there wasn't anything warm in it. I use it for work stuff. Private projects. Please respect that boundary. I hesitated. Then again, I was desperate. So I nodded. Sure, no problem. It started quietly. David was an ideal housemate on paper. He kept to himself. He paid the bills on time. He was always polite, always calm. He never drank. Never had people over. He claimed to work in software development and said he mostly worked from home. His car, a bland gray sedan with no bumper stickers, only left the driveway a few times a week. It seemed like an easy setup. But little things started to unsettle me. The basement door had no doorknob. It wasn't just locked. It had been modified. It had a deadbolt that only locked from the inside. I noticed that the only way to enter was through a steel bulkhead door around the back of the house. I only saw it open once, and it was just a crack. The smell that leaked out didn't make sense. Not rotten, exactly. More like a sharp metallic staleness. Bleach and something beneath it. One time I asked him, "What kind of work do you do down there?" He answered, 3D printing and some chemistry stuff. Just a hobby. It's nothing dangerous. He smiled again. I noticed he always smiled when he was lying. David's true nature started surfacing slowly. It was little details. For one, he always wanted to know my schedule. "You off work today?" He'd ask casually as I passed him in the kitchen. "Got any plans this weekend? Do you still go to the gym on Tuesdays?" He never asked in a way that felt overtly invasive, but he asked constantly. I thought maybe he was just a little awkward, maybe overly friendly. But one day I came home sick from work and didn't tell him. He thought I'd be gone. I heard him moving around loudly, in the garage, then the hallway. He paused when he saw me sitting on the couch. His entire body stiffened. "You're home?" he said. I nodded. "Yeah. Called out sick." He didn't say anything for a moment. Then he forced another smile. "Feel better." But something behind his eyes had shifted. That night, I heard noises coming from the garage. Not the kind of noises you can easily explain. Clanging metal, a dragging sound, and what might have been muffled shouting. I sat on my bed, frozen, listening. His car was still in the driveway. But when I peeked down the hall, his bedroom door was open and his bed was empty. The next morning, he acted normal. Too normal. offered me coffee, chatted about the weather, like nothing had happened. Another time I was doing laundry in the garage when I caught the unmistakable scent of decomposition. It hit me hard, earthy, sweet, wrong. It made my stomach clench. I'm from a rural town. I know what death smells like. "Hey," I said when I saw him that evening. "You need to clean up better after the bodies." I tried to say it as a joke, trying to mask the edge in my voice. His face went pale, completely pale. He stared at me, and for the first time, the smile didn't come. "What?" he said. I held his gaze. "The garage stinks. Just saying." A long silence passed. Then, he finally said, "Thanks for letting me know," and disappeared into his room for the rest of the night. Over the next month, his behavior got worse. He started using something, I don't know what it was, maybe meth. His eyes were sunken and glassy some nights. His hands shook. He spoke in disjointed sentences about how society was falling apart, how people were just meat with opinions. He joked if you could call it that, about women, specifically sex workers. "They're not people to most folks," he said once, casually pouring coffee. "You can do anything to them. No one cares." I stopped eating meals with him after that. Sometimes he'd play music or NPR radio so loud it rattled the windows. I'd ask him to turn it down, and he'd apologize, say he didn't realize how loud it was. I started realizing it wasn't accidental. It was cover. One night I was doing laundry when he opened the garage crawl space. I didn't even know it had one until that moment. He called me over. "Hey, come up here. I want to show you something." My body locked. Every alarm bell in my head went off. I forced a weak smile and said, "I gotta run an errand first." Rain check. I ran back to my room, packed a bag, and left for a friend's house. Slept there that night without telling him. When I returned the next day, he was sitting at the kitchen table eating cereal like nothing had happened. But something had shifted between us. The tension was tangible. David's spiraling accelerated. He started watching violent pornography on the living room TV at night when he thought I was asleep. Sometimes I'd wake up to screams, twisted audio of women crying out, distorted through heavy editing. Once he showed me a short video he'd made, a series of flashing images, clips of women bound in rope, flashes of meat being butchered, a man in a plague doctor mask walking slowly toward the camera. It made my skin crawl. "This is messed up," I said. He just nodded, eyes fixed on the screen. "It's art," he replied. I started keeping a knife in my room, locked the door at night, slept with headphones in to drown out the sounds. I made a plan to leave, but I didn't have anywhere to go until I got paid. I told him I was moving out. He didn't argue, just asked when. "Tomorrow morning," I said. That night, he got high again, sat on the back porch muttering to himself. I kept my door locked, lights off. Around midnight, he knocked on my door softly. "You know they'll never catch me," he said through the wood. "I'm the kind of guy no one suspects." He paused. "They'll never even know what to look for." I didn't respond. I barely slept. I left at sunrise. For weeks I couldn't shake the feeling that I had left something unfinished. Something wrong was happening in that house, and I had walked away. Eventually, I called Crime Stoppers anonymously, gave them everything I knew. His name, David Foster. The address on Langston Street, the trailer that had appeared in the driveway a few months after I left. The way he talked, the smells, the video, everything. The woman on the line asked me to hold multiple times. Eventually, someone else, an officer I think, started asking questions. They were interested. Very interested. Sometimes I check the address online. The listing is still up. 3-bed, 2-bath. The trailer is still in the driveway on Google Maps. I haven't heard anything since I made that call. I don't know if he ever got caught. Maybe there's nothing to catch. Maybe he was just a sick man playing a game. But out of everyone I've ever met, The drug users, the dealers, the violent exes, the street people. No one has ever left an imprint on me like David. Make of it what you will. But I pray no one else ever moves into that house without knowing who still walks its halls. I never hated dogs. Not at first. If anything, I grew up loving them. My childhood was full of retrievers, lazy basset hounds, and the occasional foster pup we couldn't afford to keep. I always thought dogs were just loyal, goofy animals, simple to please and hard not to love. That's probably why when I moved out of my tiny studio apartment and into a house with a guy named Tyler, I didn't think twice about the fact that he had 4 dogs. In fact, I was excited. I'd met Tyler through a coworker when I was desperate to get out of my lease. Rent was insane, and the house he was offering was in the outskirts of Austin, Texas. Rural, quiet, and surrounded by cedar and mesquite trees instead of blaring sirens and screaming neighbors. But if I could go back and undo that decision, I would. 1,000 times over. Tyler was odd, but in a harmless way. Early 30s, worked freelance IT from home, had a girlfriend named Jessica who practically lived with him. He came off like one of those ultra-practical survivalist types. Always had extra batteries, canned food, and filtered water jugs lined up in the garage. Still, he seemed chill and fair. And the dogs? At first, they seemed like a bonus, until the first day I moved in. "Hey," he'd said casually, leaning against the kitchen counter while I carried boxes in. "About the dogs, I need you to not mess with them." I laughed, thinking he was kidding. He wasn't. "They don't like new people," he continued. "They're only calm around me and Jess. If you try to pet them, they might freak out. Just don't go near them. Don't feed them. Don't talk to them. Don't even look at them too long." That felt extreme. But I figured maybe they were rescues or something. Maybe they had trauma. I didn't ask too many questions because rent was $500 a month for my own room and a shared bath, and I was broke. The dog stayed in his room most of the time, or out in the fenced-in backyard which stretched half an acre. Sometimes I heard them barking late at night, deep and aggressive, but I never saw them up close. Tyler always kept them locked up if I was home alone. That arrangement worked for about 3 months. The weekend everything fell apart. Tyler and Jessica were heading out to visit her family in Louisiana. He told me a week in advance. "Just so you know, we'll be gone Friday through Monday. I'll be putting the dogs in the backyard while we're away. They've got an auto feeder, and the water pump works off a pedal they know how to use. Don't go out there. Just leave them alone and everything will be fine." I nodded. No problem. What else was I supposed to say? Friday morning came. I made coffee, stared out the kitchen window at the 4 dogs pacing the backyard. Massive German shepherds, bigger than any I'd seen before. They stared right back at me, unmoving, eyes hard. It felt like a warning. I turned away and tried to shake off the unease. I left for work around 8 a.m. I do freelance product photography, so I had a shoot on location that ran late. Afterwards, I hit the gym and didn't get home until almost 6:30 p.m. As soon as I stepped through the front door, I felt wrong. It was too quiet. No barking, no scratching, just a weird pressure in the air. I turned toward the kitchen and froze. Shards of glass glittered across the tile floor. The sliding glass door was shattered. The frame hung askew like something had forced its way through with raw power. Panic struck me all at once, like a bucket of ice water dumped over my shoulders. I turned to run and heard the growl, low, guttural, close, too close. I didn't look. I couldn't. I just bolted for the stairs. I heard claws scrabbling across hardwood behind me, getting louder with every step. My only thought was, don't fall. If I tripped, I was done. I barely made it to my room, slammed the door shut, locked it. No phone. It was still in my gym bag, which I'd left in the car. I checked the window, praying I could scream for help, but remembered instantly, we lived a mile off the nearest main road, and our closest neighbor was 2 pastures away. I was trapped. I sat there in the silence, heart racing, blood pounding in my ears. Then came the first hit. Bam. Something large slammed against the door. The frame groaned. Another impact. This time followed by scratching, desperate, frenzied, like they were trying to dig their way through the wood. I backed away, whispering, "Oh my God," over and over. I didn't know how many dogs had gotten inside. I had only seen one, but maybe they were all loose. Maybe they were hunting me together. The door shook again. I ran to the connected bathroom, slammed that door too, and locked it. It wasn't much, but it was another barrier. I climbed up onto the counter and curled my legs underneath me, gripping the edges so tight my knuckles turned white. That's when I saw the small window above the sink, maybe 2 feet wide, 3 feet tall. Too small for comfort, but maybe just big enough. I hesitated for only a second before scrambling up. It took everything I had to wedge myself through, twisting my shoulders and hips at painful angles. My head scraped the top of the frame. My knee caught on a screw and tore my jeans, but I made it out. I collapsed onto the shingled roof and rolled to the edge, hiding behind the chimney out of sight from the window. My body was shaking. That's when I felt the sting. I looked down and saw blood soaking through the back of my left leg. A bite, deep and wide. The adrenaline had hidden it until now, but the pain came roaring in, hot and sharp. I stripped off my flannel and tied it around my calf as best I could. Night fell. The wind picked up. The stars blinked above like indifferent eyes. I was alone. No food, no phone, no way to call for help. I could hear them below, their claws clicking across hardwood floors. Occasionally a bark would ring out, a snarl, the sound of something being knocked over. They were still searching for me. I stayed on that roof for 2.5 days. There was an old garden hose hooked to a spigot on the roof, likely installed to clean off leaves. I drank from that when I had to. I didn't eat. I couldn't sleep. Every time I nodded off, I jerked awake at some new noise. I started hallucinating near the end. Heard voices, saw movement that wasn't there. I kept thinking I'd hear sirens or footsteps or even just a bird. But it was silent. The kind of silence that rings in your ears. Monday morning, I heard a car pull into the driveway. The engine cut off. Car doors opened. I couldn't even speak at first. I just started crying. Tyler's voice rang out from below. What the hell happened? Jessica saw me first. Oh my God, Tyler, she's on the roof. He wrangled the dogs back into his bedroom like it was nothing and helped me climb down through the bathroom window again. When I showed him my leg, he turned pale. Shit, I'm so sorry. But that apology didn't last long. As soon as I said I had to go to the hospital, everything changed. Hey, maybe you don't have to say the dogs did this, he said, nervously rubbing the back of his neck. It was probably just the glass, right? I stared at him. No, I said. One of them bit me. I'm not lying to the hospital. He didn't push again. But when animal control showed up later that day, after I'd been treated, stitched up, and started the rabies vaccine series, he stopped speaking to me entirely. They took all 4 dogs. After evaluation, 2 were deemed too aggressive and euthanized. The other 2 were sent to a specialized rescue for difficult animals. Tyler blamed me, said I ruined his family, said I lied to get his dogs killed. But I didn't lie. And if I hadn't gotten out of that house when I did, I honestly believe I wouldn't be alive to write this. I try not to blame the animals, not entirely. They were isolated, territorial, and conditioned to rely on one person. Tyler never should have left them alone. Not like that. Not in a home they weren't trained to share. I moved out the same week, took what I could carry, and didn't look back. These days, I live in a small apartment in the city. I have 2 cats. They don't bark, they don't bite, and most importantly, they don't try to kill me. Maybe one day I'll be able to look at a dog without flinching, but not yet. Maybe not ever. The real moral here? Never trust a man who tells you not to go near his dogs, especially if he doesn't tell you why.